Donald Trump just mused about Canada becoming the 51st U.S. state. Again. Yes, you heard that right. In his latest interview on NBC's Meet the Press, the former, and possibly future U.S. president, said America subsidizes Canada by $200 billion a year and insisted Canadians would make a cherished state.
Oh, well, I still believe that, but you know, it takes two to tango, right? But no, I do. I mean, I believe it would be a massive tax cut for the Canadian citizens. You get free military, you get tremendous medical cares and other things. There would be a lot of advantages, but it would be a massive tax cut. And it's also a beautiful, you know, as a real estate developer, you know, I'm a real estate developer at heart. When you get rid of that artificially drawn line, somebody drew that line many years ago with like a ruler, just a straight line right across the top of the country. When you look at that beautiful formation when it's together, I'm a very artistic person, but when I looked at that beauty, I said, that's the way it was meant to be.
On screen, Trump in studio, a U.S. flag morphing into a Canadian map with bold text reading, 51st state. Canadians everywhere bounced between skeptical laughter and seething anger. Today we are unpacking what Trump said, how Canada fired back, and the fallout. From cross-border boycotts to Tesla's big trouble in the Great White North. Trump claimed the United States doesn't need Canadian cars, lumber, or energy, and portrayed Canada as entirely dependent on American trade. He painted a mental picture of North America without a border. When you get rid of that artificially drawn line, it's a beautiful country. He even mused that adding Canada could save the U.S. heaps of cash. When the interviewer pressed him on whether annexation might involve force, Trump waved the idea off. I don't see it with Canada. Yet in the same breath left the door open for something in Greenland. Classic Trump, grandiose, contradictory, and guaranteed to provoke. Canadians wasted no time responding. Just 2 days later, Canada's brand new Prime Minister Mark Carney met Trump at the White House.
Well, if I may, as you know from real estate, there are some places that are never for sale.
That's true.
We're sitting in one right now, you know, Buckingham Palace that you visited as well.
That's true.
And having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale.
He also pressed for the removal of punishing U.S. tariffs that have jacked nearly everything from maple syrup to auto parts. Trump shrugged, insisting nothing would persuade him to lift duties on Canadian goods. The optics were frosty. Carney polite but firm, Trump hinting annexation might be a wonderful marriage if Canadians ever come around. Naturally, Canadians felt the border steel itself into something more than a line on a map. Social media lit up with hashtags like Buy Canadian and Not 51st State. It has become more than online venting. Wallets and travel plans are now political statements. A nationwide consumer boycott of American goods and U.S. vacations gained traction within weeks. Polls show more than 90% of Canadians want to reduce reliance on the U.S., and nearly half have canceled or reconsidered cross-border trips. Flights to U.S. destinations fell sharply, prompting airlines to yank capacity on routes between Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, and American hubs. Border crossings by car plunged, leaving duty-free shops at Buffalo, Blaine, and Sweetgrass practically empty except for staff counting cobwebs. On screen, a duty-free store near the Peace Arch crossing, shelves of unsold bourbon, cashier idling on her phone. The store manager says sales dropped 50%, forcing layoffs. Across the Great Lakes, small retailers in American border towns report weekend crowds thinned to a trickle. Local chambers of commerce tally thousands of lost jobs in retail, restaurants, and hospitality. Some leaders in tiny enclaves like Point Roberts, Washington, cut off from mainland America and reliant on Vancouver shoppers, talk openly about economic depression and even jokingly wonder whether they should ask Ottawa to annex them. Beyond travel and booze, the boycott reaches everyday products. Grocery chains plaster shelves with Buy Canadian Instead cards. Shoppers swap out ketchup, cereal, and even streaming services for homegrown alternatives. An Angus Reid survey found 85% of respondents actively replacing American brands. In the short run, Canadians might pay a few dollars more, but there's a sense of solidarity. Every loonie spent locally is a tiny vote against Trump's rhetoric. One American brand feeling an extra hard punch is Tesla. Elon Musk's company is suddenly a symbol of Trumpism north of the border. First came a rebate scandal. Canada's federal EV incentive program noticed an eye-popping spike in Tesla claims. Tens of millions in one weekend, far beyond showroom capacity. Ottawa froze reimbursement and launched an investigation, effectively banning Tesla from future incentives. Provinces piled on. British Columbia's premier declared taxpayers would throw up seeing subsidies funneled to Musk. Nova Scotia and Manitoba followed suit, axing Tesla from provincial rebates. Meanwhile, Tesla sales are sliding across Europe, down sharply in Germany, the Netherlands, Denmark, France, and Sweden, as Musk's political antics alienate environmentally minded buyers. In Canada, some protesters label Teslas Trump mobiles and picket dealerships. The trade fight is also shaking the financial bedrock, the US dollar. Investors typically flock to the greenback during global turmoil, but Trump's tariff blitz, 25 to 100+% on nearly every major trading partner, has them rethinking that reflex. Since early April, the dollar index has sunk to multi-year lows, while gold and the euro have climbed. Wall Street banks warn higher prices and slower growth could drive the US toward recession. International rivals are seizing the moment. China touts its yuan for cross-border deals, and the BRICS bloc floats a dollar alternative reserve asset. Even longtime allies quietly discuss invoicing energy in euros. For Canadians nervous about a sliding loonie, the irony is rich. Right now, the Canadian dollar looks steadier than its southern counterpart, at least until the dust settles. Where does all this leave us? In uncharted territory. A former US president openly flirts with absorbing Canada. A bruising trade war inflicts real pain on both sides of the 49th parallel. Ordinary Canadians answer with an unprecedented boycott, defending their dignity and flexing economic muscle. Yet there's also a growing sense of unity. Buying local feels like a patriotic act. Traveling within Canada instead of across the border supports communities from St. John's to Tofino. The message: Canada is strong, independent, and not for sale. Politically, the action doesn't stop with shopping choices. Staying informed, contacting MPs, and supporting leaders willing to stand firm remains essential. Carney drew a clear line. No insults, no tantrums, just resolute rejection of annexation talk. It's peak Canadian diplomacy, polite yet immovable. Many Americans agree with Canadians and feel embarrassed by the 51st state chatter. Consumer and voter pressure on both sides may eventually cool the rhetoric and restore normal trade ties. In the meantime, every small choice, your coffee beans, your summer holiday, your next car, can speak volumes. Keep supporting local shops. Tip your Canadian servers. Try that Ontario-made cheddar instead of an imported brand. And if you need to vent, do it constructively. Canada is not the 51st state, nor is it a bargaining chip in a tariff war. A final image fades in. A red and white maple leaf flag rippling across a skyline of Vancouver, Montreal, Toronto, Calgary. Canada strong, resilient, and proudly not for sale.